The beam from Arthur's failing flashlight cut a weak, bouncing circle in the oppressive cold of the grand, dead foyer. Every exhale was a plume of smoke, a tiny, fleeting ghost, and he could feel the damp chill of the place settling deep in his bones, a painful echo of the arthritis that had twisted his knuckles into knots. It was a cold that didn't just numb the skin, it burrowed, seeking the marrow. He'd spent their last $100 on this crypt, this monument to rot and failure. He jammed the crowbar against the locked desk drawer in what passed for a study, the wood splintering with a sound like a cracking bone. The sound was obscenely loud in the stillness. He was 78 years old, his back a column of fire, and he was robbing a grave he'd been stupid enough to buy. Behind him, he heard his wife, Eleanor, give a small, breathless cough, a dry, papery sound that terrified him more than the eviction notice folded in his wallet. Wait, before you see what's inside. If this story already has your heart pounding, tell us where you're watching from. When forgotten boxes open, when second chances hide under dust and debt, subscribe and stay close. You'll never guess what's been left behind. Now, back to the lock clicking open. Arthur. Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper, thin as the layers of dust that covered every surface, yet it cut through the silence like a knife. It didn't come from behind him where he'd told her to stay. It came from above, from the sweeping, dangerous curve of the main staircase, a place he'd explicitly told her not to go. He'd told her to wait in the car, where the last fumes of the heater might still be lingering. He'd told her this whole venture was a mistake. Eleanor, for God's sake, get down from there. The risers are soft. I can see the rot from here. You'll fall through! He turned, the flashlight beam sweeping wildly, a panicked searchlight, catching on peeling wallpaper that hung in long, leprous strips, revealing the horsehair plaster beneath. Arthur, just come here, please. There was no fear in her voice. That's what stopped him. There was no panic, no complaint about the cold. There was something else. A strange, hollow wonder that prickled the back of his neck and made his heart do a painful, stuttering leap. He grumbled, a low sound of fear and frustration. "Holding on, Ellie, you hold on." His breath caught, and he shuffled toward the stairs, his cane thunking on the warped parquet floor. The crowbar felt heavy, a useless piece of iron. What was he thinking? He was a plunderer in his own tomb. "What is it, Ellie? Did you find something? Jewelry? Bonds?" His voice was a rasp of desperate, foolish hope. They needed a miracle. This house wasn't a home. It was a lottery ticket, and it had come up blank, just like every other chance they'd taken since the savings ran out. She was standing on the landing, halfway up the grand staircase, in a pool of gray, funereal light from a shattered Palladian window. The wind whistled through the broken glass, but she seemed not to feel it. She was staring at the wall. Not at a painting, not at a hidden safe. At a small, dark-framed photograph, perfectly level, hanging on a single, stubborn nail. It was, he noted with a strange disconnect, the only thing in the entire house that wasn't covered in a thick, gray shroud of dust. "Ellie?" he panted, gripping the banister. It was slick with mildew, and he almost recoiled. "He told me I was beautiful," Eleanor whispered, her gloved finger reaching out, tracing the glass. Her breath fogged the frame. "You told me." "What are you talking about? We're leaving. This place is a death trap. I can smell the black mold from here." 1964, she said, her voice catching, ignoring him completely. "The picnic at Lake Talaha. After the spring formal. You had that new camera, the one your father gave you for graduating. You spilled the potato salad all over my skirt." He stopped, his foot hovering over the next rotted step. The air went still, heavy and thick. He moved beside her, his shoulder aching from the cold, his hip throbbing. He followed her gaze, and the flashlight fell from his numb hand, clattering down the steps, rolling to a stop, and plunging them into near darkness. But the gray light from the window was enough. It was more than enough. He saw it. It was her. It was Eleanor, 16 years old, her hair in a high ponytail, her head thrown back in a laugh that he could almost hear, one hand batting at the camera. She was wearing the yellow sundress her mother had made, the one with the little blue buttons, the one she was buried in. Standing next to her, his arm draped possessively around her shoulder, was a young man with too much dark hair and a stupid, love-struck grin. It was him. It was Arthur. Arthur's heart seized. He grabbed the banister to steady himself, his knees turning to water. This wasn't possible. This was a trick of the light, a symptom of the cold, of the mold he was breathing. It was a hallucination brought on by despair. That's, he stammered, the words refusing to form. It's the one we lost, Eleanor breathed, tears welling in her eyes, freezing almost instantly on her papery cheeks. The one that was in your mother's album. The one that burned in the fire, Arthur. The fire at your parents' house. What is it doing here? This was the hook. The house wasn't just abandoned. It wasn't just a stranger's collection of forgotten things. This was their life. This was a memory, a precious, unique, irreplaceable fragment of their past, stolen from them by fire 50 years ago, hanging on a wall in a derelict mansion they had never seen, in a town they had never visited, bought for $100 at a tax auction. Arthur's pragmatic mind, the mind that counted pennies and measured risks, shattered into 1,000 pieces. He sank onto the stair, his cane clattering beside the flashlight. Ellie, who lived here? Eleanor didn't answer. She was mesmerized by the photo, by the impossible, tangible ghost of her own youth. She reached out and touched the frame. It's warm, she whispered. It wasn't, of course. It was just her. She turned her head, her gaze drifting to a small mahogany side table just a few feet away, something he hadn't even noticed. On it, another frame. Arthur, she said, her voice shaking now, a thread of real, primal fear woven through the wonder. Get the light. He fumbled on the steps, his hands numb, snatching up the flashlight. He thumbed it on. The beam was weak, yellowish, but he pointed it where she was looking. It was another photograph, a formal studio portrait. His mother and father, standing stiffly, his father looking like he'd swallowed a lemon. Beside them, Eleanor's parents, her mother with a tight, forced smile. They were all younger, from just after the war. But they weren't alone. Standing between the two families, her hand linked with Arthur's mother, was a young woman with a defiant smile and dark, piercing eyes that seemed to bore right through him. A woman Arthur had only seen in one other photograph, the one his father kept in the back of his desk drawer, the one his mother would sometimes take out and cry over, the one he was told in no uncertain terms never to ask about. Aunt Agnes, he whispered, the name tasting like rust and secrets. That's my Aunt Agnes. Agnes, the black sheep, the one who ran off with the wrong sort, the one who broke her father's heart, the one, according to family lore, had vanished, penniless and disgraced, somewhere in the Midwest. She hadn't vanished. She had lived here, and she had been watching them. The cold in the house was suddenly different. It was no longer the passive chill of neglect. It felt active, personal. The cold of a story that had been waiting, frozen in time, for them to arrive. What does this mean? Eleanor's hand found his, her icy fingers lacing with his. Her grip was desperate. Arthur looked at the two photographs, the one of their impossible, sun-drenched youth, and the one of their parents' shared, buried secret. He had bought this house as a final, desperate gamble, a place to die, perhaps, when the eviction from their tiny apartment was finalized. He thought he was buying a ruin. He realized with a crushing, terrifying weight that he had just bought a reckoning. He helped Eleanor to her feet, his own legs trembling. "It means," he said, his voice steadier than he felt, "that we're not leaving. Not yet." They spent the rest of the day in a daze, moving through the cavernous, frozen rooms like archaeologists. The house was a disaster, a corpse. The kitchen floor was a soft, pulpy mass of rotted wood and linoleum. In an upstairs bedroom, a portion of the roof had collapsed, leaving a jagged hole open to the bruised winter sky. Snow and wet black leaves formed a moldering pile on what was once, perhaps, a beautiful hardwood floor. It smelled of decay, of raccoon, of the slow, patient, unceasing march of time. They found no treasure, no stacks of cash, no antique furniture that wasn't ruined by damp and animal droppings. The beauty of the place, its high-beam ceilings and intricate moldings, was a rotten skeleton. The developer who'd been at the auction, the one with the slick hair and shiny shoes who'd laughed when Arthur put in his $100 bid, had been right. It was a teardown. But it wasn't empty. It was full of them. In a rotting hat box in a closet, its silk lining stained and shredded, they found more photos. Dozens. Eleanor at her high school graduation, looking terrified and hopeful. Arthur in his first army uniform, trying to look tough, his ears sticking out. A blurry snapshot of their wedding, their parents beaming on the church steps, with Agnes, the pariah, nowhere to be seen. And then, at the bottom, wrapped in a piece of oilcloth, they found them. Photos of their son, Michael. Michael as a baby, a scrunched, angry-looking thing in a too large christening gown. Michael on his first bicycle, a red Schwinn, one foot on the pavement, looking back for his father's hand. Michael, age 12, holding a small silver-flanked fish, grinning his gapped-tooth grin. Eleanor sank to the floor, the damp seeping into her good coat, and she wept. Not the quiet, dignified sobs of an old woman, but the raw, gasping, animal wails of a mother who had lost her child. She held the photo of Michael and the fish, her hand shaking so badly Arthur had to take it from her. "How, Arthur? How did she get these? This one was in my purse. I lost it. I thought I lost it." Michael, their son, gone 30 years now, taken by a fever that had swept through his college dorm in a matter of days. The loss had hollowed them, had drawn a permanent, jagged line through their lives. Before Michael and after. They had survived, but they had never truly recovered. The grief was a quiet, permanent houseguest. Arthur looked at the return addresses on a stack of mildewed envelopes nearby. They were from his mother, addressed to A. Rutherford, ESQ, at this very address. "My mother," Arthur said, the words catching in his throat. She never stopped talking to her. All those years, my father, he said her name was never to be spoken. He forbade it. And my mother, she was sending her pictures? She was sending her our son. The betrayal was so old it was almost academic, but it stung, a fresh, sharp wound. His parents, his stern, upright father, had lived a lie. They had performed their grief and anger for the family, all while secretly maintaining this connection. And Eleanor's parents, too. The photo on the stairs proved it. They were all in on it. "They weren't betraying you, Arthur," Eleanor said, reading his mind as she had for 53 years. She wiped her eyes on her dirty glove. They were protecting her, and maybe they were protecting us. From what? From a lonely old woman? From the truth? He snapped, the sound of his own anger shocking him in the dead quiet. He moved to the window, scraping frost from the glass with his thumbnail. The house sat on a hill. Below, the town was a small, neat grid. Down the street, a bulldozer sat cold and yellow beside a pile of rubble. The developer. He was already at work, erasing another piece of the past. She was keeping up, Eleanor said softly, coming to stand behind him. She couldn't be with us, so she collected us. She built a life out of these, out of our memories. The house wasn't a home. It was a museum, a one-woman secret museum of the family that had cast her out. And now they, the last of that family, had inherited the collection. "It's junk, Ellie," Arthur said, his voice flat. He was trying to rebuild the wall in his mind, the practical wall. "They're just photos. They don't fix the roof. They don't pay the heating bill. They don't stop the bank from taking our apartment on the first of the month. We have 2 weeks, and we're on the street." "They matter," she insisted, her chin stubbornly high. "What matters," he said, "is the $10,000 that developer offered me in the parking lot. He saw me win the bid. He came right over. Smelled like expensive cologne. 10,000 in cash, old man," he said. "Save you the trouble of paying for the demolition." "I told him to go to hell." "Good," Eleanor said. "No, not good. Stupid. Pride. That $10,000 would get us a new place, Ellie. A small, clean one. It would be enough. I'm going to call him. I'm going to find his number, and I'm going to take the deal." "No." "What do you mean, no? It's my name on the deed. It was my $100. "It was our life she was holding," Eleanor said, her voice fierce, the old fire returning to her eyes. "It's Michael. It's our wedding day. It's your mother's secret. You can't sell that for $10,000. It's not a choice, Ellie. It's arithmetic. It's survival." "Then it's bad arithmetic," she cried, her voice cracking. "What is the point of living, Arthur, if we just sell the parts of ourselves that matter? We're old. We don't have time to make new memories, but we can't sell the ones we have. We can't let him plow all of this, into the dirt." She was right, and it made him furious. He was the man. He was supposed to be the provider, the protector, and he had failed. He had brought them to this, a cold, dark choice between a warm bed and their own past. He stalked back to the study. The desk drawer he'd been prying at was still jammed. He picked up the crowbar. This time, he wasn't looking for treasure. He was looking for a way out. He was looking for an ending. He jammed the metal into the gap and put his full, furious, 78-year-old weight on it. The wood exploded. The drawer flew open, scattering its contents across the filthy floor. Not bonds, not jewels, just paper. Deeds. A property tax bill from 1998, the last one paid. And a journal. A small leather-bound book, its cover stiff and warped by damp. He sat in the ruined chair, the flashlight propped on the desk, and opened it. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, and angry. The first entry was from 1955. "My father calls me a disgrace. My brother, his shadow, calls me nothing at all. They think a check sent once a month is enough to buy my silence, to keep me from their precious, perfect world. But I will not be erased. I bought this house with my own money, the money my grandmother left me, the money they all thought was gone. They think I am poor and alone. They are wrong. I am alone, but I am not poor." Arthur's hand trembled. He read on, for hours. Eleanor came in and sat on a dusty footstool wrapped in a moldy blanket she'd found. He read aloud, his voice growing hoarse. He read about Agnes's life, the man she'd loved, a professor at the local college, who had died of tuberculosis just a year after she was disowned. He read about her quiet, solitary existence. She was a librarian in the town below. She was respected. She wasn't a pariah. She was just alone. And he read about them. June 1965. My sister-in-law, God bless her, sent me a photograph of Arthur and his new wife, Eleanor. A beautiful girl. He looks so much like his father, but his eyes are all my mother. He looks happy. I pray he is. May 1970. Michael. They named him Michael. A perfect, beautiful boy. I saw the photo and I wept. I wept for the joy of it, and I wept for the cruelty of a world that keeps me from holding him. I am a grand-aunt, and I am a ghost. Arthur had to stop. His throat was too thick. Eleanor was sobbing quietly into the blanket. This wasn't a collection. This was a vigil. He turned the pages, past decades. The entries grew shorter. The handwriting started to shake. August 1995. Michael is gone. My sister-in-law's letter was broken. I feel as though a light has gone out in the world. I went to the park. I've seen them there sometimes. Arthur and Eleanor. They walk, but they don't talk. They look like two halves of a broken plate, glued together, but the cracks still show. They sat on the bench by the duck pond for an hour and never looked at each other. I wanted to tell them that I understood, that I too had lost everything. But what right do I have? I am the ghost. I just watched them walk until they were out of sight. Arthur closed the book. He couldn't read anymore. The weight of it, the suffocating, absolute weight of this woman's secret love. She had been there. She had watched them in their grief. A silent, unknown witness. "The developer," Eleanor whispered. "You can't call him." Ellie. He was so tired. The cold had finally won. He felt nothing but the ache in his joints. "No, Arthur, this isn't her house. It's her life. It's the only thing she had. And we're the only ones who know it. We can't let a bulldozer take it. It would be like losing Michael all over again." He looked at his wife, her face pale and streaked with dirt in the flashlight beam. She was 76, frail, and had a cough that wouldn't quit. And she was the strongest person he had ever known. He knew in that moment that they were ruined. They would lose the apartment. They would end up in a state-run home, in separate beds. But they would not sell this house. It was a terrible, irrational, and completely necessary decision. "Okay, Ellie," he whispered. "We won't sell." The relief that washed over her face was so profound, it was almost painful to watch. She smiled, a real smile, the first one he'd seen in months. "Good. Now, help me up. I want to see the kitchen. If we're going to live here, I need to know where the sink is." He stared at her. "Live here? Eleanor, you're mad. The roof is gone. There's no water. It's 15 degrees. We'll be dead in a night." "We have a blanket," she said, gesturing to the moldy wool. "We have coats. And we have this." She tapped the journal. "It's a start. We don't have to be warm, Arthur. We just have to be here." He wanted to argue. He wanted to scream. He wanted to cry. He did none of those things. He just put the journal in his coat pocket, picked up his cane, and helped his wife to her feet. The kitchen, right. They spent the next week in a whirlwind of impossible, frantic activity. Arthur, using the last of their meager savings, bought a small, noisy generator, a small electric heater that put out a pathetic circle of warmth, and a box of industrial-strength trash bags. He and Eleanor, wearing cheap painter's masks, began the Herculean task of clearing the first floor. They worked from sunup to sundown, fueled by a strange, cold fire and stale crackers. The work was brutal. Arthur's back screamed. Eleanor's cough worsened, echoing in the huge, empty rooms. They found a dead raccoon in the pantry, but they didn't stop. They were no longer just cleaning a house. They were performing an exorcism. They were reclaiming the story. The developer, a man named Mr. Shaw, returned. He saw the sputtering generator, the weak light on in the dusk, the pile of trash bags by the curb. He strode up the broken walkway, his expensive suit looking absurd against the backdrop of decay. "Arthur, right?" he called out. He was holding a briefcase. "Heard you were camping out. Look, I admire the pioneer spirit, I really do, but let's be real, you're not fixing this place." Arthur was on the porch, re-nailing a loose board. He didn't stop hammering. "We're managing. You're trespassing on a condemned property. I could have the city out here in an hour. They'd evict you." Arthur stopped. He looked at Shaw, at his slicked-back hair and his $1,000 shoes. "We own the property, son. It's not condemned. It's just resting." Shaw laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Okay, I get it. You're holding out. You found something. Old-timers always think there's gold in the walls." He stepped onto the porch and opened his briefcase. It was full of cash. Stacks of hundreds. $20,000, right now, my last offer. "You take this, you walk away, and you go buy yourself a nice, warm condo in Florida. You don't take it, I'll have this house declared a public nuisance by Friday. That roof, the foundation, it's a danger to the community. Your choice." Arthur looked at the money. $20,000. It was salvation. It was a warm bed. It was new clothes and hot food. It was the sensible, logical, correct choice. He looked past Shaw, at Eleanor, who was standing in the doorway, her face smudged with soot, holding a scrubbing brush like a weapon. "Mr. Shaw," Arthur said, turning back, "this house, it belonged to my aunt, my family." "I don't care if it belonged to the president," Shaw said, his smile fading. "It's a write-off. It's a plot of land, and I'm going to own it." "No, sir," Arthur said, turning back to his hammer. "It's not." "Fine," Shaw snapped, closing the briefcase. "Be stupid. Be cold. I'll be back on Friday with the city and a bulldozer, and you, old man, will be on the curb." He stormed off. Arthur watched him go. He felt a terror so profound it almost buckled his knees. He had just condemned them. He had made the final, wrong choice. "Arthur?" Eleanor said from the doorway. He turned. I need to find something. Something to stop him." "We'll find it," she said, but her voice was small. But they both knew they wouldn't. The house was a wreck. Shaw was right. They were just two old fools playing house in a ruin, clinging to a ghost story. The next 3 days were a blur of despair. The generator ran out of gas. The cold returned, more bitter than before. Eleanor's cough was a constant, barking rhythm in the dark. They were defeated. They huddled together in the study, wrapped in the one moldy blanket, sharing the last of the crackers. On Thursday, the day before Shaw was to return, Arthur sat in the study, in the dark, holding the cold flashlight. He had failed. He had failed Eleanor. He had failed Michael. He had failed the memory of this woman, Agnes, who had loved them so much. "We have to go," he said to the darkness. Eleanor was asleep, or unconscious, he wasn't sure, huddled under their pile of blankets. Her breathing was shallow. "We'll go to the shelter." He stood, his bones cracking. He shone the light around the room one last time. Looking for what? An answer? A miracle? His light landed on the desk, the drawer he had broken. He hadn't just scattered papers. He had scattered everything. He knelt, groaning, and began to pick up the pieces. Tax bills, receipts, and envelopes. Stacks of them. He recognized the elegant, looping hand. Agnes. But these weren't letters she'd received. These were letters she had written. And they were stamped. And they were all addressed to one person. Arthur Rutherford, 12B Willow Creek Apartments. His address, their address. He ripped one open, his fingers clumsy. It was dated a week ago. No, that was impossible. He looked closer. Not this year, 20 years ago, 1999. My dearest Arthur, I don't know if you will ever read this. I am old now. The house is cold. The lawyers who were supposed to help me, they've taken everything. The trust my parents set up, the money I had, it's gone. They say I am incompetent. They say I must go to a home. But I will not. This house is all I have. It is all we have. I am writing to you because you are the only one left. I have followed you. I know you are a good man. She was my only friend. Please, if you ever get this, don't let them take my house. Don't let them erase me. He tore open another and another. They were all the same. Desperate pleas, written over and over as her mind began to fail. She had been writing to him, her last living relative, for help. But she had never mailed the letters. "Oh God," he whispered. "Ellie, Ellie, wake up." He shook her gently. "Ellie, look." She stirred, coughing. "What? Is it morning?" "It's Agnes. She knew we were coming." He read the letters. He read them until his voice was gone. She had been cheated, robbed, by her own lawyers, a firm in the town. Shaw, Miller, and Reese. Shaw, the developer. The pieces clicked into place with the sickening, final sound of a coffin lid closing. Shaw wasn't just a developer. He was the son or the partner of the men who had robbed her. He wasn't just buying up derelict properties, he was creating them. He had let this house rot, had let her die in poverty, so he could snatch the land for pennies. And he had laughed at Arthur for paying $100 for it. The $100 that now made Arthur the legal owner. He wasn't trying to buy the land, Arthur said, the realization a hot white light. He was trying to buy our silence. He was trying to buy these. He held up the letters. A new energy flooded him. It wasn't the manic energy of despair. It was cold, hard rage. He was 78 years old. He had a bad back and a weak heart, but he was done being a victim. "Eleanor," he said, helping her up, "get your coat. We're going for a walk." They walked out of the house, down the hill, into the town. It was 5 a.m. Two old, frail figures marching with a terrible, slow purpose. They didn't go to the police. They didn't go to a lawyer. They went to the offices of the Westfield Gazette. The editor, a young woman with tired eyes and a coffee-stained desk, listened. At first, she was dismissive. Another crazy old couple. Then Arthur laid the journal on her desk. Then he laid out the letters. Then he showed her the photograph of his mother and hers, standing with Agnes. And then he told her about Mr. Shaw. The next morning, Friday, Mr. Shaw did not arrive with the city. He did not arrive with a bulldozer. Instead, 2 police cars and a sedan from the state attorney's office pulled up to his sleek, modern office on Main Street. The story was explosive. It was the front page of the Gazette, and by noon it was on the regional news. Prominent developer accused of decades-long fraud. The ghost of Agnes Rutherford. The town, which had seen Shaw as a benefactor, a man bringing progress, suddenly saw him for what he was, a thief. But the story wasn't just about him. It was about Arthur and Eleanor, the elderly couple who had lost everything, who had spent their last $100 on a hunch, and who had uncovered a crime that spanned 50 years. And the town? The town responded. It started with a knock. A local contractor, his face grim from the story he'd read. "Mr. Rutherford, my grandfather lost his farm to Shaw's father in the 70s. We always knew it was crooked. My crew is free this weekend. We'd like to patch that roof for you. No charge." Then the diner. A van pulled up, full of hot coffee and sandwiches. "You folks gotta eat." Then the Historical Society. They were interested in Agnes's story, in the journal, in the photographs. They wanted to help preserve the house. They brought heaters, they brought blankets, they brought a chemical toilet. By the time the snow began to fall that evening, the house was no longer dark. It was blazing with lights. The sound of hammers echoed in the cold night air. The smell of sawdust and coffee replaced the smell of decay. Arthur and Eleanor sat in the study, which was now warm. A volunteer had patched the window. Eleanor was holding a hot cup of coffee, her cough already easing in the warm, dry air. "You did it, Arthur," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "You saved her." Arthur looked at the stack of letters on the desk, the letters that had saved them. He reached out and took her hand. "No, Ellie, she saved us." The house, it turned out, was not a teardown. Under the grime, it was magnificent. The wood was old-growth pine. The foundations were stone. It had been built to last, just like the woman who loved it. The developer, Shaw, was ruined. His assets were frozen. The investigation revealed a web of corruption that brought down half the city council. But Arthur and Eleanor paid no attention. They were too busy. The Historical Society, in exchange for the right to display Agnes's journal and some of the photographs, declared the house a local landmark. This meant grants. It meant tax breaks. It meant the house was safe. It took 6 months. 6 months of volunteers, of donations, of hard, aching work. Arthur stood on the wide, repaired porch, the air smelling of fresh-cut pine and new paint. The sun was rising, catching the dust motes that danced in the new, clear glass of the Palladian window. The house behind him was warm and quiet and alive. He heard Eleanor humming inside, a sound she hadn't heard in years, a simple, tuneless hum that echoed through the warm wooden floors. He turned, leaving the cold morning air behind, and walked back inside. He passed the landing. The 2 photographs were there, side by side now, in new, polished frames. The girl of 16 laughing in the sun, and the woman who had watched over her from the shadows. He walked into the kitchen, where Eleanor was making tea. And for the first time in 30 years, their home was filled with the smell of hope. He just took her hand. She looked up. Her face, still lined with grief and age, now also lined with peace. He didn't need to say anything. He just squeezed her hand, and the house, their house, held them, safe. He looked out the new kitchen window, at the town below waking up. He was 78 years old, and he was finally home.